Dystopia warning, obviously. Now I'm supposed to be taking a bit of a break at the moment because my life is falling apart like wet cake. As you know, I despise the Conservatives, but there's some that I hate more than others, and she's one of them. When it came to Braverman, what I used to feel was nothing but, violent anger. That's still there, but it's been replaced by something entirely different. Like a really dirty, sick knot in the pit of my stomach. You know, the kind of feeling that you get when you know that something is deeply, deeply wrong? When I see her hateful rhetoric, her deplorable culture wars, now all I think about are the worrying historical parallels. This goes far beyond people skirting around it and calling it 1930s rhetoric. At this point, it's like they're using the most shocking and shameful historical events as a fucking policy guide. What this government is doing and has been doing from the beginning is weaponising the horrific conflict between Israel and Gaza. Nobody can deny the event that happened in Israel was disgusting. Nobody that I know of sound mind does anything but condemn Hamas. Nobody has ever denied that Israel has to coin a Tory phrase, the right to defend itself. Granted, every country does, but that's not the problem here, is it? The problem is that it's verging into war crimes and that it goes far beyond self-defence. And it is undoubtedly breaking international law. The Conservative Party do not see this horrific conflict, which is having real life consequences for people in Gaza, but also for people in this country that have relatives there, people in this country that are Jewish, that might have relatives in Israel, that might have family members that are being held hostage. This government is weaponising it. Instead of bringing communities together, they're pitting two communities against each other, two grieving communities. And to make matters even worse, those two particular communities are facing a marked increase in hate crimes. So what does that hateful piece of shit think that the best approach is? To create more division, to create more outrage, to inflame tensions, to throw out offensive, inaccurate, and incredibly dangerous rhetoric like referring to pro-Palestinian rallies and marches as hate marches. What? They're simply calling for a ceasefire, which I am, which any decent human being should. Because as we all know, Israelis are not Netanyahu. Gazans are not Hamas. People are not their fucking governments. I can undoubtedly confirm that because these cunts do not represent me. Their exploitative, hateful incitement is not happening in my fucking name. So why are they throwing their toys out of the pram this time? Because the protesters, as they have been every weekend since the conflict began, have been gathering in London, and they're planning to do it around the time of Armistice Day. Now, what this prick isn't pointing out is the fact that they never had any intention of going anywhere near the cenotaph. It's all been blown out of proportion. A Home Secretary is supposed to be there to oversee law enforcement, not use the law enforcement for her own political ends. She's supposed to be there to protect communities, not divide them and throw petrol bombs on them. She's supposed to be there to uphold national security, not put people at increased risk of extremists. Let's get into Armistice Day, shall we? What was that all about? The armistice was the ceasefire that ended hostilities between the Allies and the Germans on the 11th of November 1918. Now, it didn't end the war, but it stopped the fighting whilst the terms of permanent peace were discussed. A ceasefire is precisely what the protesters are calling for in London. A ceasefire to stop innocent people being killed. Now, what they're doing by politicising these protests is pretty obvious to most people, isn't it? And whilst I say this, bear in mind that the cenotaph was never on the route for the protest. Firstly, they're turning this series of protests into a political issue, right? A divisive issue, inflaming tensions and anger on all sides, which is putting all of the public at risk. So what happens? Well, what happened today is the Met ended up having to issue a statement, didn't they? All along, they were advising the Home Secretary, everyone involved, that there was no real danger to this. What caused the danger was the Home Secretary's language. So the police are now calling on people to not attend this march, which, what do you think that's going to cause? It's going to cause people that are rightly outraged that their civil liberties and their freedom of speech is being taken away to possibly form breakaway groups. Now, this works on two levels, unfortunately, both of which undermine all faith in people in politics and the police, because as Partygate taught us, those guys are operating firmly, not in our interests, but in the interests of the state. They're essentially the henchmen of the government. They turn a blind eye whilst, multiple serious crimes are committed by this government, and then go in all heavy-handed with us and push women face down on the floor. I'm sure they get off on it, considering how many of them turn out to be sex offenders. So these breakaway groups that are angry, fair enough, who wouldn't be, turn up in London, probably isolated from any kind of main organised protest, and then they encounter all those gam-gams, all those pork lads who have decided to go down to London because they see it as a good opportunity to punch some brown people. And then what does the government do? They use this, they weaponise this as a way to legitimise their clampdown on our right to protest by going, oh, look what happens when people protest, look at the dangers. What this government is essentially doing is instigating the real life hysteria that exists on those fake posts on Facebook where people go, oh, brown people are trying to take away our poppy. This is hate, hysteria, fake news, misinformation, courtesy of the Conservative government. Saida Varsi summed it up beautifully. She said, some of my colleagues project as patriots, but they are indeed arsonists. People might be motivated to kill with racist intent because of our Home Secretary. Let that sink in. And also remember that she has previous. Her rhetoric, her dehumanisation of asylum seekers, created the conditions for a man to firebomb a migrant processing centre before taking his own life. Let's not also forget that she tried to move someone with TB onto the Bibi Stockholm barge. A move described as a public health catastrophe waiting to happen. But in the end, the Legionella that they did nothing about for many days was the reason that people had to be moved off the barge. And you remember when I was saying about the shocking historical parallels? Well, this is all a bit Boer War, scorched earth, isn't it? Britain invented the camps, and the Tories, with their disease-ridden processing centres, death barges, are also doing their best to try and let nature take its course when it comes to dealing with people that they don't like the look of. The only reason processing centres and barges are being used is because they've failed to deal with the backlogs, because they don't want to be seen as accepting of asylum seekers when they have no choice because it's international law. The tent situation, similar. It's just hate rhetoric. It's just a distraction. It's incredibly easy to debunk and point the finger back at the government when it comes to their shocking failures when it comes to homelessness. Everything that we are experiencing in this country that is wrong is because of government failures. Then you get onto the King's speech. The country's on fire. Everything's a mess. Sunak is too weak to act when it comes to his out-of-control fash Home Secretary. So what does he see as a priority? Speed limits, cigarettes. The country he's supposed to be in control of is ablaze, and he's acting like some parish council nan, grumbling about speed limits and teenagers smoking. They might as well have put in the speech, we fucking give up, we're just looting the country now, because that would be the truth. This was taken out of the King's speech. I don't even know if they know who they're appealing to with these culture wars anymore. Certainly not British values, which they claim to stick up for. Punishing homeless people are not British values. They're not things that anyone in this country of decency sees as anything less than contemptible. And under this government, we're more likely to be homeless than any other generation. Anyway, fuck the lot of them.